Right, so I've decided to make another unpopular opinion video, and this one is going to focus on issues of ostentatious wealth and display in this Park Slope Church. I guess it's called St. Augustine. It's a Roman Catholic church in Park Slope, and it was just burglarized or robbed, as in robber fly, and what was stolen, I guess, is what's described as a $2 million $2 million gold tabernacle, and one of the and all of this, you know, in the middle of the Roman Catholic Church's continued struggle to remove women's rights in the United States, and oh, I wanted, before I talk about the tabernacle and the $2 million object and its loss, which I actually and this is my, you know, unpopular opinion, which I actually see as a good thing, as a wake up call. But before I talk about that, I wanted to talk about this bishop's refusal to give the sacrament to Nancy Pelosi, and refusal to allow her to take communion, and what that represents as a gesture within Christianity, and I wanted to recall the descriptions of the Last Supper, in which the Eucharist presumably, you know, has its origins, unless the Roman Catholic Church is taking credit for that as well now. But there were a number of descriptions of the way that Christ welcomed individuals into his company, before that company, you know, represented a church. And one way was a meal, or inviting someone to table. And so you can say two things. You know, the idea of the invitation to table is the invitation to the feast. It's part of Judaism that you know, existed for probably thousands of years, you know, before Christ himself. And another way was, you know, simply the breaking of bread, or the sharing of significant either, you know, either moment in consuming food, or the sharing of some significant object, like an article of clothing. And another way was foot washing, right? And the gesture of bathing, which also is represented in this idea of baptism, right? So the bathing, the washing of hands, the washing of feet, the baptism in the river, whether that river is Jordan or some other river. All of these gestures were, you know, gestures of belonging to the company that later became a belonging to the company of the church. But I did want to point out that that in the depictions, you know, of the Last Supper, you know, both in the Gospel and in the history of European art, it's fairly clear that, you know, even Judas Iscariot was invited, you know, to accept the communion, and you know, Christ himself didn't sort, right, by political opinion. And when he did have, you know, a difference with one of the members of his community, you know, he let them know. And you'll recall the story of restoring the ear and various gestures that were made. And he wasn't always in agreement with the behaviors or actions of his following, but he didn't deny anyone communion based on their politics. And what I wanted to point out about the story of the bishop denying Nancy Pelosi the Eucharist and the communion is that that is not that it is not the place of a bishop or even the Pope to determine who receives this. If an individual belongs to the at least if we're pretending that if the church is pretending that it's actually Christian, then the model, if one follows the life of Christ as a reasonable model of what represents Christianity, then one doesn't deny the Eucharist to a member of the church based on one's politics. And that, I would argue that denial is significant enough violation of Christian tenets that that particular individual should be defrocked and removed from the church. And I'm sure that's also an unpopular opinion. But let's move on to my unpopular opinion regarding the robbery of the $2 million gold tabernacle. And I guess the beheading of some of the figurations of the angels as well. I'm certainly not pro beheading in any way, but what I wanted to point out about the $2 million tabernacle, and particularly in relationship to a statement that was made about it. The bejeweled 18-karat gold vessel had been built into a metal casting behind the altar of St. Augustine Roman Catholic Church in Park Slope. That did not stop thieves believed to have burglarized the church sometime between Thursday night and Saturday afternoon. And there's the space, now that represents the place where the tabernacle had been. And here's a quotation that was presented to the press by Father Frank Tumino. This is devastating, as the tabernacle is the central focus of our church outside of worship. Holding the body of Christ, the Eucharist, which is delivered to the sick and homebound. All right, so a $2 million artifact of 18-karat gold is utilized as a space to hold the symbolic representation of the body of Christ, which is delivered to the sick and the homebound. What I want to know is why the $2 million tabernacle was never sold, and that $2 million was not utilized in the service of providing for the sick, the homebound, and the homeless in this neighborhood of Park Slope. And I want to know, I want Father Frank Tumino to tell me exactly where it is in the discourse of the gospel that Jesus Christ ever talked about creating an ostentatious display of a $2 million tabernacle that should become the central focus and the central image of this church, rather than walking among the people and helping those who need help, particularly when you have $2 million at your disposal to help them. What I want to know is, how is this Christianity, how is a $2 million tabernacle the body of Christ? And how has the body of Christ become a political argument to deny women the right to exist under patriarchy? And there's the angel who has no head. So what I would suggest is, if the angels are unable to protect the gold that is the display of the belief that somehow seems to have missed everything that I understand about the Christian gospel, somehow seems to overlook the Beatitudes, the Sermon on the Mount, what I always understood were Christ's requests from his disciples to walk among the poor and the sick and the homeless and the helpless, and to, as he said, do as I do. Because the church was the Spirit, was the healing, and it was the teaching. It wasn't a $2 million display of ostentatious wealth. So rather than worrying about getting this angel's sculptural head back, I would be more concerned if I were a member of the church and reacquiring the wisdom that angel's head actually represents.